Hello and welcome to the Metal Pack Pod, the industry's leading podcast for the global metal packaging market. The Metal Pack Pod is brought to you by the Metal Packager, the number one digital resource for the global metal packaging market. This podcast is brought to you in association with our sponsors PPG, a global leader in innovative, safe and reliable coatings. Their range of sustainable solutions help protect and beautify the world. Recently, our podcast was voted in the top 10 for packaging podcasts globally, so please do like our podcast and receive regular updates when the latest episode drops. In this episode, we welcome back popular guest Jason Galley, Director and Chief Executive of MPMA. I speak to Jason about delving into the current state of the UK metal packaging industry, focusing on the significant challenges and changes such as extended producer responsibility, EPR for short, deposit return schemes, and tariffs. We discuss the industry's resilience, the complexities of packaging reforms, and the necessity for effective communication and collaboration with government bodies to ensure sustainability. The conversation also touches on broader themes of sustainability, consumer behaviour, and the economic implications of current policies, highlighting the importance of raising awareness and advocating for the benefits of metal packaging. We hope you enjoy the episode. Good afternoon, Jason. It's been a little while since our last conversation, so certainly a lot's changed since we spoke a few months ago.
Yeah, it seems like we've crammed a lot in since then.
Absolutely. I know certainly the state of play in the UK metal packaging industry is turbulent is probably one word to describe it. I know we've got the likes of EPR to discuss, DRS, tariffs. We could probably have a podcast episode for an hour or two about each of those. So, we've got a lot to pack in. But just for our international listeners, I think probably a nice opportunity just to set the scene, really, in terms of the UK side of the market. I mean, what are the conversations that are taking place and what's the information from the members that you've been receiving at the moment?
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, thanks a lot for inviting me back. As you mentioned, there's a lot going on, and mainly around packaging reforms in the UK. So the big ones really are extended producer responsibility, the idea of the polluter pays, or in this case, the producer pays, which is the brands. And then the deposit return scheme for beverage containers. So between those two, and then with our very close neighbours in Europe pushing through packaging and packaging waste reforms, it's probably the biggest raft of changes in the UK packaging industry for maybe 20 years. So a lot going on for trade associations as well as for our members. So that's kind of the backdrop.
Absolutely, looking forward to unpacking a few of those areas. I mean, for those, it's often the case with trade associations that people don't necessarily know what happens on a day-to-day basis. So I think when you've got certainly some significant topics that we're speaking about, I suppose it gives you guys an opportunity to justify your existence, so to speak, with your membership.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is, Alex, if we're doing a good job, there's nothing to see. And that's part of the problem for trade associations. So if you can imagine some rocks in the road around the corner that are about to kind of derail you, that you're no way through. By the time you get there, if we've done our job, there's no rocks there anymore. We cleared them, and there's nothing to see. So, I'm pleased to be able to come on a podcast like this to tell you that there is a lot of work that's been going on that's keeping the path clear for metal packages in the UK.
And in terms of the UK side of the market, I mean, are you optimistic for the state of play as we are now? I know certainly EPR has been a very complex issue. I mean, what's your take on things at the moment in terms of, if perhaps we can take things one step back in the pathway where we are and where we have been, and the looks to the future as well, because it's certainly a complex topic, and certainly when I've been to a few conferences in the UK recently, it's been a topic certainly on the lips of everyone at the moment. So perhaps an update for our members and our listeners would be appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of starting high level, I guess it's a pretty resilient industry. I mean, it's given me a lifetime career, and there's lots of my colleagues as well who've enjoyed some really positive times. I'm sure those positive times will continue. And there are some rocks in the road. I'm some of it's been handled really well and some of it not as well. And maybe it's worth comparing and contrasting that. So the deposit return scheme, DRS, actually there's been an awful lot of collaboration across industry. So not just our sector for metal packaging, but also in PET packaging. Obviously there's PET bottles in the DRS scheme. But also the brands, the retailers, there's a whole lot to pull together there. And to a large extent, that job's been done really, really well over the past several years. So that side of things has been great. But, on the other side of DRS is how difficult we're making it. It should really be a slam dunk. If you look at the other countries that have done this, they're all pretty much hitting their 90% target, at least the ones that have been there for a few years or more. And that's whether or not glass is included. So in terms of dealing with litter, in terms of increasing the quality of recycled material available and therefore increasing recycled rates and recycled content, in terms of addressing consumer behaviour and educating that there's a value to packaging as well, it's been really, really positive. And like I said, it should be a slam dunk in the UK. But not only have we Brexited from Europe, we've managed to somehow exit partially from ourselves, if that's even possible. So we have our 4 devolved administrations in the UK, all with a slightly different slant. And the history in the UK, the DRS is, Scotland, the brave, going out alone and starting their DRS scheme with glass in. And then we had some political interference that pulled glass out, and that left Scotland really in the lurch, and with something like 86 million pounds worth of debt in Circularity Scotland, the organisation that was set up to run it. So a pretty painful sting at the start, and then the devolved administrations all agreed how they would go forward, and it looked like we were on again. Meantime, Ireland, without such, I'll talk about the Republic of Ireland now, without such constraints, has cracked on and started. I think they're pretty much just gone over a year, and doing really, really well. I think the last report was that they're getting something like 90% collection rate, which is the first target really for DRS. Then we thought we were kind of ready to go again in the UK with Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and England. And then we have this situation where Wales has decided that they want glass in, and sticking to their guns there, as glass, being a collection, being a precursor to reuse as well. And so in order to continue their wishes for their packaging reforms, they've actually exited the agreement that was there. So now we're fighting. Well, not fighting. We're working really hard with various groups to make sure that we maintain as much interoperability as we can between the scheme that will happen in Wales and in the rest of the UK. And that Welsh scheme, I think the timing is one of the critical parts, because otherwise we'll have a bit of a mess if we don't have, all of the PET bottles, all of the beverage cans in at the same time. And then, of course, we do have the issue that glass will be in Wales, out in the rest of the UK. So plenty to unpack there, plenty to advise governments on, use governments plural, in order that we can make sure that we've got an operable system. So that's DRS. So on the one hand, really good collaboration amongst industry. On the other hand, some hiccups in the way the vision's slightly different in the different countries, but those slight differences can lead to big issues for the whole supply chain, really.
We interrupt this episode for a brief segment from our sponsors, PPG.
Packaging coatings from PPG draw on our company's 140-year history of innovation. We never stop improving our solutions to meet the evolving needs of can makers and the marketplace. That spirit of innovation results in technology like the cradle-to-cradle platinum-rated PPG Innovel Pro. PPG Innovel Pro is the latest enhancement to the world's #1 non-BPA beverage can coating. It still doesn't use any bisphenol ingredients, but experienced can makers report that it now sprays like an epoxy. Follow PPG Packaging Coatings on LinkedIn or visit packagingcoatings.com to learn more about why PPG is the coatings partner for can making excellence.
So it sounds like you're fairly, I was going to say, you sound like you're fairly optimistic on the DRS side. They can taking things a step back in terms of EPR. It sounds like it's been a different picture and some frustrations from the policymakers at MPMA at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment broadly. I mean, it's a noble pursuit. EPR is designed to do the right things. And when all the consultations went out, the first heralding of EPR was that it was going to reduce the amount of packaging that's used, reduce the amount of packaging waste, increase recycling rates, generally reduce waste and promote a circular economy. And so we're there kind of thinking, this is great. We can really support this as a metals packaging industry. We can really support this. We have, the thinnest packaging material. You take a food can, for example, it's about 3 times thinner than the competing materials. And because of that, it's a really efficient use of resources if you're going to make something to pack food in. Really long shelf life, so 3 to 5 year shelf life. So great for avoiding food waste. So we're ticking all the boxes about reduced packaging and reduce waste. And then if you look at the recycling rate, the metal packaging recycling rate, particularly steel. So steel has the highest recycling rate of any packaging material in the UK at 78%. And you compare that to some of the competing materials like plastic at around 52% overall. And there's a study done by Zero Waste Europe on beverage cartons. Not quite food cartons, but the figures there are around about 29% in the UK. So much lower recycling rates with those products. And yet the fee per container is significantly higher for the metal version. So, while we were there kind of thinking we can do a really good job, we're now being hindered by the base fees that are being set. And I must stress that DEFRA is saying these are illustrative base fees. So there's still some way to go. And we're hopeful of some improvements. So with all of those benefits, and you can throw in, food banks as well and how dependent they are on tin cans, and you can throw in, think about during COVID, or think about people's cupboards in Ukraine now and how many tin cans they might have in order to provide food security. It's a pretty important product, and we have to protect it for UK PLC. And so our engagement really has been to help DEFRA come to a better conclusion on its base fees. And that's proving a kind of slow piece of work. It seems that there's been a lot of work behind the scenes at DEFRA to come up with a really good model for how they apportion the costs. And maybe it is a good model. Maybe it does help you apportion the costs, but if the data going in isn't good enough, then the result coming out also won't be good enough. And I think that's where we are at the moment. We worked really hard on both the aluminium side and the steel side to provide some better data in order that we can get a more realistic output and more realistic base fees.
Sorry to interrupt, Jason. I was going to say, is this purely a data-driven issue then, or is there something a little bit more substantial at the heart of DEFRA in terms of lack of understanding, or the message of metal packaging and its benefits to society? Are they not resonating through? And is there more work to be done from the industry as a whole? Or is it a case of competing materials have got a bit more of aggressive marketing approach to these things? Or it's just it seems to be quite a curious message that seems to be getting lost with the decision makers at DEFRA for sure.
Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure that the decision I think intellectually it's understood. I think people do get it. I think part of the problem is that there needs to be a kind of distance between an opinion and what the base fees will be. So the model was the way to do that, to provide a mechanism to be able to say, The model says this, therefore that's the number that we have to use. And I think that now that model is kind of hamstrung the decision makers there, and they have to kind of follow it. So I think the first step at least is to get the right data into the model and to do it early, to do it now. I mean, to be honest, this should have happened. This kind of collaboration that we have with DEFRA now should have happened 4 or 5 years ago. To do it just before you're releasing the fees, and then find out. I think there's an acknowledgement that basically things are disadvantaging the heavier materials. And we get responses like, well, don't worry, we'll put this right when we modulate for recyclability. But that's a year down the line, and it's too late, really. The fees need to be correct from minute one. So, yeah, I think they get it, but I think they've placed themselves in a really difficult position, and metal packaging is going to be one of the areas that suffers.
But in terms of, as an association, you sort of informal chats that we've been having recently, you seem to be optimistic about certainly MPMA and your relationship with DEFRA, and hopefully getting some of these stumbling blocks over the line. Because if we don't, it sounds like this could potentially be quite harmful to the metal packaging industry.
Yeah, I mean, so DEFRA are engaging with the trade associations, which is really good, and we're pleased to be the trade association for metal. And we do have a good voice. And like I say, I think the arguments are landing intellectually. So the question now is, will those changes to the data being used come quick enough and be enough to put the base fees where they should be? My feeling is no. Will the modulation come soon enough and be high enough to correct where the base fees are landing currently, the illustrative base fees? Again, I think probably not. So now we're in a situation where it's a sad situation, really, where we have a model, and yet we're probably going to have to look at how we can convince people that the model needs to be just one part of the consideration, and we need to look at this, zoom out a little bit and look at the. I hesitate to use unintended consequences, because now we've explained what the consequences will be. They are intended if you carry on. But these consequences that will happen from these poorly set fees are going to have, big impacts, not just on our sector, but on everybody involved, really. So, the consumer is going to see inflation, for sure. It's something like 4% on a supermarket owned brand can of beans, for example, just from these fees. Then, if at consumer level, the differences between the materials aren't going to be huge. You can have inflation on all of the materials. But when you get to brand level, retailer level, where you're purchasing hundreds of millions of containers, then you start to see these differences stack up. And we're charging something like 88% more for a can in metal than a similar size container in fibre-based composite. So when you do that, and you do that over significant quantities of units, then you end up with a way to mitigate your EPR fee, which of course all the producers will look to do, whether that's passing it on to consumers where they can, but remember it's a really tough retail market at the moment, or whether that's looking to mitigate by other means such as material switching. And that's the real danger. If that happens, then the goals that I stated at the beginning about increasing recycling rates, using less materials, less packaging, those go out of the window. In fact, you kind of travel 180 degrees in the wrong direction. And if you are, even at DEFRA, they're going to lose too, because if people migrated to the product with the lowest cost on this EPR tax, then you migrate to the lowest cost, less revenue comes in. And by the way, the materials that people have just switched to are more expensive to process, and you're going to end up with a diminishing income and increasing costs, and be going cap in hand for higher fees the next year. It's really a lose-lose situation that's being created here, and it needs to be addressed quickly.
So where are we left now at the moment? Is it a case of wait and see at DEFRA, or are we optimistic there's going to be a decision made shortly?
Yeah, I kind of refer to the elegant approach of trying to get the data right and get the models to spit out the right number, but it's going to be too slow, I think, by the time. I think some studies need to be done again, and DEFRA is even asking MPMA to pay for the study to speed it up, which is sticks in the throat a bit, but fine if that's what you need to do. So I think the other way to do this thing is to educate more and more people outside of DEFRA. At the moment, I don't see any kind of real accountability or governance of the decisions that are being made and how they will impact the different packaging sectors and the whole packaging landscape in the UK. And until more and more people understand that, and more people in government understand that, we won't have enough of an impetus to change. So our job at the moment is to raise that awareness, and we're meeting with various backbench MPs, for example, really spreading the word about aluminium and steel packaging, how these EPR fees are landing to their detriment and how that's going to drive the wrong behaviours and the wrong results, in order that we can get a kind of groundswell of support and opinion that will help get these messages across and get some change. We're also working directly with at ministerial level to get change as well. And I think once the penny drops, then we'll start to see some change. What I don't want to have to happen is for mass switching away from one packaging type to another to be the only impetus for people to have a look at these fees. We need to paint that picture now and get the change that we need now.
Is it a bit of a concern that it seems to be globally we're seeing a shift away from sustainability practices and them being sort of front and centre of governmental policy? Certainly the Trump administration in the US, which we'll get onto shortly, because that's another juicy topic for us to get into. But it seems to be globally, I know certainly in the last 10, 15 years, sustainability, certainly for metal packaging since that kind of Blue Planet 2 moment of plastic being washed up in the ocean, that kind of the anti-plastic sentiment was there, and metal packaging rode the wave of that. But it seems to be, I don't know whether this is anecdotal, but it seems to be less of an emphasis on sustainability credentials from a lot of brands at the moment. I don't know whether it's a case of consumer fatigue in terms of sustainability, and I just wondered, is that penetrating through to government influencers that you're speaking to at the moment? I just think we're at potentially a precarious moment in time, really, for metal packaging, when we're talking about metal being infinitely recyclable and the sustainability credentials. When people haven't got necessarily a lot of money in their pocket, they tend to make decisions based on price rather than recyclability and sustainability, things like that. So I'm just wondering, is it we're at kind of the crux of a perfect storm, really, with a few of these issues?
Yeah, I think the cost of living crisis continues, right? We've not come out of it yet. So when that happens, people are watching the pennies. And I wonder how much the consumer understands about the different virtues of the different materials. Everybody's saying their material is fantastic, right? And why wouldn't they? But at the moment, I think there is a lot of short-termism. People are running along, looking down at the shoes instead of looking at the horizon and what the big picture vision is. And our membership is full of leaders in the sustainability arena. I mean, metal packaging has such a great story. Why wouldn't they be? Why wouldn't they lead on the sustainability aspects? Because there's a kind of sustainability and commercial win-win there. So, we still see that leadership from our membership, which is really great. I just wish that ambition and that leadership would be shown by the people who are pushing through these packaging reforms, because it's a real opportunity to create a similar kind of win-win. And not taking that opportunity it's such a tragedy.
So, Jason, just want to touch upon the recent news with regards to steel and aluminium tariffs. I know it's been a pretty significant discussion point within the industry. But the news that Donald Trump has announced that steel and aluminium for tariffs for the UK will now be essentially stopped. What does that essentially mean for the UK?
Yeah, I think all business needs certainty, and that there's still a lot around the tariffs that's uncertain, particularly outside of the UK, but it will have knock-on effects for the UK. I think I've always said that it appeared to be a negotiating ploy to put tariffs and show the world what they could be, and then row back from that position to get a result that's better for the US. And I think that the UK's approach to kind of wait and see and not be overreactive was a good one, and I think it's paid dividends. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of impact on the membership, obviously our membership is more than, a lot of the members are pan-European or even global. So there are still issues for all of our members, but this news on the UK is encouraging.
Do you think in terms of overall relationship between trade for steel and aluminium between the US and also the EU has fundamentally shifted, though? Do you see that this is potentially I know we've had Brexit has been a significant issue in the past few years, but do you think this means that potentially the partnership between the UK and the EU will be stronger as a result, and ultimately it may just be a warning sign for those doing business in the US that potentially the UK market is disposable, and that maybe looking after our traditional closest neighbours may be the way to go?
I don't think that you can afford to lose any trade partners. You know, we're in a business that needs volume and needs to grow. And, you know, I think it's important to keep relationships going on all sides. And I think that the UK has done a pretty good job of that.
And is there any, I suppose, any unintended consequences of the uncertainty that we've seen? I know, obviously, we now have certainty, but do you think there's any consequences as a result of this moving forward that perhaps the membership needs to be made aware of? Or is it a case of pretty much plain sailing now?
No. I mean, as I mentioned, there's many things to iron out in the rest of the world, and we are near neighbours, obviously, to Europe. So there's going to be consequences still as this goes on. There's been some conciliatory tones, I think, between the US and Europe, which is good. You know, in terms of unintended consequences, for example, aluminium UBCs wouldn't have been under the tariff regime. So despite the fact that the UK has been resolved, there's still going to be a high demand for UBCs, recycled aluminium, in the US. And it's really going to impact the market for scrap metal, which is a big issue for our members, especially as they pursue their goals to increase recycled content. So it's a crazy situation that there may be more recycled metal being shipped to the US than actually their recycling rate for beverage are well below 50%.
Excellent. And just overall, I know we've said before when we had conversations with you that business obviously thrives on certainty. So the fact that we seem to have a pathway moving forward must be a positive for all.
It is, but there are still many uncertainties. And the issue, what it affects is investment, right? People are not sure where's the best place to invest. Is it the UK? Is it Europe? Is it America? While these things are all moving and shifting. So it kind of creates a stasis. And while there's no investment, there's not much growth. Yeah, it's going to get resolved. It's going to have to. You know, we need each other, and the US certainly needs metal and packaging, and they can't do it self-sufficiently. The US is a net importer of rolled metal products for packaging.
I suppose the positive message here is that despite what's being thrown at the metal packaging industry in the UK, we've certainly a few juicy topics that we've spoken about, that the industry still is pretty vibrant and it's got a great story to tell, and certainly it's got some excellent brand owners, companies, can manufacturers, and it's a robust industry. And I did a podcast recently with Gus Reel from Stolly Machinery, and he said that the metal packaging industry wasn't recession proof, but perhaps recession resistant, so that whatever's thrown at the industry, it's always pretty robust and will still grow as a whole. So it's a pretty positive view in the industry, and I'm sure it's one that you can perhaps subscribe to as well.
Yeah, overall, generally still growing. I mean, I think it's it's been made. It seems to be being made harder than it needs to be, especially in the UK. But yeah, we are a resilient industry. I was in a factory the other day that been there for 114 years, and I was making this point to DEFRA that we'd like to see it there for another 114 years. But there is generally global growth in the beverage can, which is fantastic. And you've seen outside investment recently into you see investment in the industry generally. You see investment in recycling capacity. You see investment in green steel. So there's lots that's still going on that is supportive of what is a vibrant industry. People will always need metal packaging. We'll always need food cans. We'll always need to pack our beverages in cans as well. So that's, I subscribe to the point that it's, a product that is needed and, may not be recession-proof, but is certainly resilient. And there are growth areas too. You look at the new products that are going into beverage cans at the moment, whether that be wines or even low alcohol beers, no alcohol products, and cocktails, that kind of thing. There's plenty of new areas for the beverage can to extend into.
Are there any trends in particular? I know you touched upon a couple there. Are there any trends that kind of excite you or interest you at the moment? As certainly not necessarily with your MPMA hat on, but your industry stand-in. You've been in the industry for a little while, so you've got a pretty good take on these things. So just curious to see if there's anything that really excites you moving forward.
Yeah, I think in particular the beverage can expanding into these new kinds of products is new and exciting. You see a lot of new young brands choosing beverage cans to start with, which is fantastic. So it shows that it's a kind of modern choice, if you like, a popular modern choice. So that's really, really good to see. And I am excited about the decarbonisation that we're managing to see in both steel packaging and aluminium. So as an industry, the metal packaging industry and its supply chain is actually leading the way and showing a great example of how to move towards net zero. And it's a long journey, but there's definite leadership there, and that's really good to see.
And is there anything the industry as a whole you think, when you look at your membership, that we could perhaps improve upon in terms of? I know we mentioned it earlier about perhaps other materials are a little bit more proactive and aggressive in their marketing strategy. Is that a frustration of yours, or is there anything? I'm just thinking, is there anything that we could do better as an industry? Because it's, and I'm probably guilty of this myself, when you're speaking all day, every day about metal packaging, you can sometimes take your eye off the ball in terms of what else is happening within the packaging sector. So it's always good to see how we can improve and get better as an industry as a whole.
Yeah, I think I used this phrase when we spoke about a year ago, and so I was astounded and a little bit disappointed at the constant procession of people in decision-making positions who didn't really get it, didn't really understand metal packaging. And so I'd like to sit here and say a year later, that's all been solved. Everybody knows the virtues of metal, and we're going to see a thriving industry just because of that. In reality, it's a constant job. The message doesn't always go in first time. The person you turn up to talk to about an issue one day isn't there the next, especially since we've seen a change of government. So this is why that piece about educating the MPs, and as many, specifically our constituency MPs, educating them around metal's virtues, what it provides in terms of good, stable employment, high quality jobs, and the job that it does for sustainability, and some of those key areas around food waste and food security that I mentioned before.
So you're a couple of years into your role now at MPMA. Did you were you prepared for what you've been thrown into? I suppose it seems like it's certainly into the deep end.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, yeah, there's no shallow end. So, yeah, what I found was that, I mean, clearly the grounding in working in industry for 30 odd years was really, really helpful and useful. When you get to figuring out how governments work, how people within civil service area work, then this was an area that has to be learned, and you can speed up that learning. One of the things we do at the MPMA is we use parliamentary consultant to help us understand the mechanics and the etiquette and the ways and means in which you can start to meet the right people and bring some influence to bear. So, yeah, I think that's probably been the biggest, steepest learning curve. At the end of the day, in an industry or certainly in a company, at the end of the day, there's always the ability to say, yeah, okay, we've discussed it, now we're doing this. You don't get that with government. So it's all about influence. It's all about, how you can show a path forward that's win-win.
And celebrating those slow wins, because things definitely don't happen overnight. But no, definitely throughout this conversation, I think it just shows you the importance of good trade organisations, and certainly yourself and MPMA are doing some sterling work on behalf of the industry. So congratulations on that front. But just to conclude this conversation, if anyone would like to join MPMA as a member or find out some more information, what should they do?
Yeah, well, let's start with the why first, and you kind of hinted at it before. So we are a small team. We've got something between members and associate members, something like 30 members, and our staff is 3. And we've got a great team, do a lot of work and punch above our weight, and obviously we leverage all of the power and might, knowledge of our membership and of various organisations that we use for PR and consultancy, etc. So all of these things take money. They take time, which means people. And if you think about, let's just take the plastics industry, for example, they have something like 300 members against our 30, and they have something like 30 staff against our 3. So you're looking at a tenfold size difference. And that matters. That matters for every consultation that's done. It matters for every piece of PR work that's done. It matters for getting the attention of the right people in government and in government bodies and NGOs. So we are working alongside that. And the more we have pretty good reach in terms of metal packages in the UK. It's in the sort of mid 90%. So there are not many that aren't in, and we're working hard to get those players into our fold as well. Where we think there can be more support, I think, is from the supply chain that clearly depends on selling cans and on a thriving, happy industry. So I would urge those companies, I would urge member companies to talk to their suppliers about this. And it's dead simple. You just contact Jason at mpma.org.uk.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm sure we'll have some listeners who will take us up on that offer. So, Jason, I think that's been a very eloquent overview of the state of play of the industry at the moment, and certainly some challenges, but my overriding take is still optimistic for the future health of the industry, and long may that continue. So, I appreciate your time, and we'll catch up soon.
Yeah, thanks again for the opportunity, and maybe we do this in another year and everything's solved.
Fingers crossed, but we'll be on to another issue. There's certainly never a dull moment, is it?
No.
Thanks. Take care.
Not at all. Thank you. Thanks, Alex. Bye-bye.